Are you tired of right-wing and illiberal voices dominating social media and podcasts?
I'm sick of it!
So are we. That's why we created The Free World, a collective dedicated to defending liberal democracy and pushing back against authoritarianism. On The Free World, we explore how each of us can take a stand with rotating main hosts, regular guests, and the occasional surprise visitor. Some faces you'll know, others will surprise you.
Why do I get the feeling you're trying to surprise me?
We're also not afraid to engage with those who disagree with us. If you believe in our mission, subscribe to our YouTube channel and support us on Patreon. Together, we can amplify the voices that matter. Here we are, the first episode of an untitled podcast. Do we have a name yet? Maybe not.
We could. I like the code name Free World. Free World's a pretty good code name. We can think of something later on, I suppose. But it's a good kind of brand name, I think. It sort of sums up what we're doing.
Australia clock.
Okay, well, here we are. My name is Pekka Kallioniemi. Very official introduction. I'm the creator of, probably the best known for creating the Vatnik sub-series, studying Russian disinformation, shitposting on Twitter, and so on. And then maybe we can move on to Joe, aka Kraut.
Oh, hey, you can call me Joe. I just woke up and look probably very disheveled.
Very.
Looking good, my man.
Oh my god, look at my massive eye rings. Wow. Yeah, I only slept like 3 or 4 hours.
I like the heavy metal style locks. It's very good.
I'm just too lazy to cut my hair, to be honest. I make YouTube videos. I've been doing them for years. I've met Pekka in Vilnius a few years ago.
Oh, you guys have met him in real life, huh?
I haven't met you, but we're going to get around to that.
No, not yet.
And we're going to do a podcast that's going to be great. Maybe we should call it the time zones because we have to wake up at Australia o'clock now.
Yeah. It's look. This is part of the appeal. Like all of us are beyond the reach of Trump being able to black bag us, I suppose. We're like exiles of the free world.
Who are you? Can you introduce yourself?
Oh, introduce myself. Right. Sorry. Yes, good point, Pekka. Good point. My name's Drew. I guess I'm known for my shit posting on Twitter, but I've done a lot of random interesting things over the years. I guess I mainly was known for my opposition to the Chinese Communist Party. I sort of like was protesting against Chinese Communist Party influence in Australia, and as a result, I almost got expelled from university, and I got beaten up a few times, arrested a few times. They denounced me in state media. I've been denounced by Iranian state media. I had a kidnap plot. Chinese government tried a kidnap plot against me in 2023, and then this year I recently came back from reporting near the front lines in Ukraine as well. So I guess I'm sort of like a content creator now, but I sort of started out as a human rights activist. And I guess the thing that unites us all is that we're all believers in the free world that is unfortunately seemingly in disintegration right now, which is a very sad time to be in.
Okay, I have a funny story about Joe and me. We met in 2023 in Vilnius, as you said, and you said that, okay, do you want to do a promotion for your channel or whatever? I think we were just like Twitter promotion, and I was just way too drunk to do it. I know, that's exactly why I told you to. That's exactly why. It would probably been the worst promotion or the best promotion ever. But I mean, that's how I still remember that evening, some like parts of it, and I remember that part. It was a fun evening.
You didn't seem drunk at all, to be honest.
Oh, it's the Finnish kind of stoicism.
Yeah. That was a great meetup. I really enjoyed all the people that we met there.
It was good.
A lot of good connections. It's a pity we didn't do another one.
Yeah, and we should talk more about it now because Drew wasn't there, so he'll
I mean,
out.
Oh yeah, maybe we should do it in Australia and force everyone to pay 2,000 euros for the flights.
Oh man, it's like, it's so expensive to get to Europe, and it takes so long. I'm unfortunately separated by a vast distance. Tell me about this meeting.
You gave a really good lecture at the Culture Center, I think. What was it called?
Vilnius.
The building was called the Kaunas Culture Center, I
Oh,
think.
okay. Okay.
I'm not entirely sure if I remember that correctly. Yeah, you gave a presentation on Russian disinformation, which was really good. Among other things, there were like a lot of presentations. I filmed some of them for myself. We went to the Russian embassy, and they called the cops
Nice.
because they were annoyed.
And I think it was the first event, public event, where Gabrielus Landsbergis was like talking about very openly about defending Ukraine and so on. Yeah, it was a very good event.
We met a lot of Ukrainians. We met a lot of Ukrainians with that, which were very, very lovely people. I think all of us have gotten to know a lot of Ukrainians over the last few years. And I'm always very happy to meet Ukrainians, to talk with Ukrainians about and listen to what they have to say about the situation that they're unfortunately in. We'll get to bring on a lot of Ukrainian guests as well in the future if we continue this.
I was recently messaging this lady who's Crimean Tatar activist, and I wanted to do a podcast with her. She could be a guest on the show. That would be really good. You guys probably already follow her. I forget her full name, unfortunately. But if I show you a photo, you probably would recognize the account.
Okay. I have a question for both of you.
Yeah.
Why did you start talking so much shit about Russia and defending Ukraine? What was the kind of the cataclysm? I don't know if that's even the right word for it, but what started it for you? Maybe Drew, you can start.
That's a great question. I mean, I sort of alluded to it earlier when I was introducing myself, but listen, my background was really in the China sphere, and I'm always so passionate about the Chinese Communist Party, their threats against Taiwan. I'm very passionate about the Tibetan cause, Hong Kong, the Uyghurs, etc. And to me, obviously, I just always saw China and Russia were fully aligned, and just really the day of the invasion, just watching all day the bombings and the atrocities and stuff like that. That was just such a huge wake up call to me, because I'd already been like opposed to the Chinese Communist Party for a couple of years as an activist, and then like this seemed to be like the kind of moment. It was a big turning point in history where this new Cold War. It really does feel like a Cold War between sort of like democratic countries and this emerging axis of Russia, China, Iran, and I think that was like the moment where, to me at least, it felt very much like that was like the Cold War almost turning hot. It was just such a wake up call that all the things that I cared so much about, like the threats against Taiwan, the threats against Australia, the Chinese Communist Party's aggression, like right here, Russia was doing, yeah, Russia was just going full mask off, and you could see right then and there what that new axis wanted for the world. And I think it's not a coincidence, for example, like, Xi met with Putin met with Xi just right prior to the start of the invasion, where they signed the now infamous, the No Limits Friendship Pact, or No Limits Partnership Agreement, where it really did look like Xi Jinping was effectively greenlighting the invasion. And so this was my big wake up call, as someone who really my main issues up to that point were Hong Kong and China and everything. That's when I was like, this is all part of the same cause. This is something that like I need to educate myself about. And I basically dropped everything. I went to Eastern Europe, and we started transporting aid for like about a month, and we're just driving aid to like Ukraine from mainly Austria. I was based near Graz in Austria, and we were just driving aid basically for 3-4 weeks, and we'd covered thousands and thousands of kilometers. And I went to Lviv on that trip. I really wanted to go further, but this was only right after the Battle of Kiev had finalized with Ukraine's victory, and it was still really dangerous at that point. And the parents and stuff were like, "Don't go further." I only went to Lviv on that trip, but just it's just been something I've just increasingly become obsessed with since 2022. I went over there, dropped everything straight away to try transport aid and stuff like that, and ever since I've basically been obsessed with it, and just I started reading like Svetlana Alexeyevich's books about Russia, and I started reading much more about Ukrainian history and everything. I listened to every single one of Timothy Snyder's like 26-part lecture series on Ukrainian histories, which is an amazing lecture series. And yeah, I just had to teach myself all this stuff, and that's how I became like obsessed and really passionate about this stuff.
Yeah, and for our MAGA listeners, Austria and Australia are two different countries. So you can, if you find a map somewhere, you can check that they are not very close by. But I mean,
I do love
yeah,
Austria.
Joe.
It's a beautiful country, man. It's a shame that you guys have so much sort of like Russian spy infestation in Austria, Krat.
Yeah, yeah. It's legal here. It's legal here, which is the crazy thing. Spying is legal in Austria as long as you don't spy against the Austrian Republic. So most countries
Crazy.
here have like spy bases. There's a
Yeah.
restaurant in the 9th district, which I heard used to be it's a Russian restaurant, so it used to be a KGB base, operation base, pretty much in the open and stuff like that. And there used to be a bank here called the Dona Bank, the Danube Bank, which was a financial operations base for the KGB, where the money that they would use for operations in the West would go through that bank. And money from things that they stole in the West would go through that bank back into the Soviet Union. So it was very much the open here. Yeah.
And there's a movie also, The Third Man, right? It's about.
Oh, that's a big cliche. That's a big cliche. I think the main thing is financial crime, like dirty, like financial things, like uh, uh, okay, like using the financial sector in this country to move money around to places where it maybe shouldn't be. Um, yeah, there's a lot of like dictator money going through this city, basically. Yeah.
And you have Raiffeisen and.
Yeah, who still operate in Russia and provide pension funds for Russian soldiers and stuff like that. And also a lot of like the kids of Central Asian dictators have like properties here and stuff like that. I even bumped into one of them. I bumped into not a dictator kid, but I bumped into the kid of a Russian oligarch, quite a famous one on the nightlife here. Yeah.
Bloody hell. I was going to say, Krat, Austria's situation kind of reminds me a bit of Australia's situation vis-a-vis China, like Australia's like such a center for like Chinese money laundering to get money out of the Chinese Communist Party's hands. Heaps of princelings, like oligarchs' kids, basically live here and everything. Xi Jinping's cousin infamously was like a high roller at Crown Casino, which was like our biggest casino chain, and they were like literally moving in hundreds of millions of dollars in black money through that stuff. It's just interesting, like the kind of actually, you know what's an interesting point, right? Australia, Austria, Finland, all three of us are like kind of like smaller countries in like the sort of democratic world that have like basically been over by like or at big risk of being over by like these like massive hegemons in like the Russia, China, Iran camp. Obviously Finlandization. Pekka, we've literally had like some top like national security like scholars and like thinkers and intellectuals who've been advocating like full blown that Finlandization is the model that Australia should have against China. So I think that's like so interesting, right? Like it just I guess we didn't really like try and plan this, right? But Finland, Australia, and Austria were all kind of like on the periphery. I guess we're like sort of smaller countries in the democratic world, and all of us have just basically been menaced by like the kleptocrats putting all their dirty money through us, and Finland was like literally invaded. Just interesting parallels. Interesting that we all came together here.
It's more, I think, like it's the neutrality here. This is a country
Yeah.
that really takes advantage of neutrality to provide financial services and stuff. And people, they don't like if you're going to make a security argument to be pro-Russian in this country, it's kind of meaningless because there's several countries between Austria and Russia. So who are you going to protect yourself from in terms of a military invasion? It's more sort of the Russian money. I think a lot of people here really like the Russian money, to be
I
honest
think
with you.
it's everywhere. People love Russian money. It's basically why the war is still ongoing. Is because people love so much Russian money. But Joe, maybe you can briefly talk about how you decided to start shitting on Russia, or have you done it for a longer period?
I think for not just for me, but for a lot of people here, one of the bigger moments was 2014-15. I think for a lot of people in Western Europe, the entire annexation of Crimea and then the dirty war that they fought in the Donbass kind of flew under the radar. But what really sort of brought it up to the horizon was when they shot down the airliner. I remember that
Ooh.
very vividly when they
27
MH,
Australians.
yeah, yeah, and a lot of Dutch citizens, yeah. And then you had the pictures on social media. I remember that very vividly, where these Russians, the soldiers, they posed with like the teddy bears and the luggage of people they had just killed.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, anyone who keeps up to date with what Russia is will know that it's a horrible dictatorship, that journalists are murdered, that there are no free elections. So there's of course an opposition to it, but I think generally also 2022 was a big wake up call for a really a radicalizing
Yeah.
moment for a lot of people in liberal politics. My personal obsession throughout most of the last few years is Viktor Orbán,
Yeah.
who I really despise. I live next to Hungary. I know a lot of Hungarians. My dad used to work in Hungary, so that's a bit of a personal obsession of mine because
It's like Trump's obsession now too. Oh, I mean, not Trump, but like the intellectuals around him, Tucker, all those types of
I
people.
find that very ridiculous, to be honest, because there's nothing
Yeah,
intellectual to urbanism. There's
yeah, I know.
nothing.
That's true. That's true.
It's very sleazy. It's very. It's also like I think that Orban is actually destroying Hungarian democracy. I see it as like
Yeah, of
what he has
course.
done over the last 20 years is a playbook to how to destroy a democracy, and that's why I would like to inform more people about it. That's why I constantly post about it, and why I'm somewhat obsessed with him. And I think what he's done, like when you look, a lot of people don't know about all the things that he's done, but things that he's done in the 2000s and 2010s, they're kind of happening now in America. Like
Mm.
he infamously refused to acknowledge the election results of 2006 when he lost the election. Went on some rambling speech that the nation cannot be in opposition, blah blah blah. The gutting of the state's institutions, all that stuff. The wrecking of an independent judiciary, the complete gangster privatization of the social security services, all that stuff, the financial crime aspects, the buddying around with dictators, all of that happened in Hungary in the 2010s, and it's now starting to creep into other countries. Yeah, which is why I want to talk more about it.
What's your thoughts on this kind of like Orban was initially kind of
He's supposed to be a liberal.
I mean he was kind of against the Putin administration at first.
He took money from Soros.
Yeah, but is it like a conspiracy theory? What are your take on this? Is like he went to Russia and he came back and he seemed a bit, I don't know, stressed or even like, I don't know, startled by something, and suddenly like this he became pro Putin, or was it like, how do you see
The
this?
guy who made Hungary dependent on Russian gas was actually his predecessor, Ferenc Gyurcsány. He was the one who negotiated the gas deal in the 90s with Russia, built out the pipeline infrastructure. So Orban merely continued what his actually also very corrupt and crooked predecessor did. There's a lot of different opinions on what Viktor Orban is, and it's very difficult to nail down to a degree. A very influential Hungarian political scientist, Balint Magyar, he was sort of like he caused the university to be shut down with his works on Hungarian corruption of the Orban regime. He believes that Orban is just a gangster, that all the ideological talk is just a facade that is meant to hide that he is the head of a criminal syndicate that is basically taken over a country and is robbing and stealing whatever they can to enrich themselves. There are Hungarian left-wing people who have also theories who think that like I have a left-wing Hungarian friend who thinks that this is sort of neoliberalism with democracy removed. This is what you get if you go full-on free market without democracy. That's the sort
Doesn't
of,
he call it like illiberalism?
he calls it his what he creates a illiberal democracy. I think when people tell you who they are, they should believe you should believe them. And I do genuinely think that he is sort of this fascistic right-wing guy who genuinely believes in this illiberal democracy nonsense. He now gives speeches where he's openly racist, where he talks about the white heritage of Hungary, which is very funny for a country founded by Asian nomads 1,000 years ago.
That's pretty
But
funny.
yeah, um, it's also, man, it really depends. You can make any case. Like, Orban likes to go around to right wing events in America, to CBAC and co, and say that he's protecting Hungary from gender pronouns, right? Hungarian is a genderless language.
Just like Finnish, yeah.
Yeah, there are no gender pronouns in Hungarian. So
That's
is he
pretty funny.
protecting Hungary from something that isn't real, right? And it's that, for example, would lend itself to the case that he's just a gangster, that he's just a grifter, a fraud, who says whatever he can.
Opportunist.
Yeah.
Because people say that about Putin as well.
But you could also, but the racist speeches he gives and all that crap, and the things he does with Putin, that lends itself to the argument that he's genuinely believes in this right wing autocrat way of government.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, if you look at it, so if you look at the Trump administration, they consider China be the biggest enemy. But I mean, Orban is doing a lot of stuff with Chinese Communist Party. I mean, the train between Belgrade and Budapest is still in the works, I guess. This very, very fast train, and most of the infrastructure projects in Hungary are done by the Chinese, and they even had this Chinese university. And it's an interesting story. I think is it Peter Mayer, or what's the name of the mayor of Budapest? I think he named all the streets around the university with something like Tibet Street and
I heard of that. Yeah.
So but eventually they closed down the university. Yeah.
In foreign policy, he's incredibly opportunistic. What people often overlook is that he basically crawls up the arse of anyone who he thinks can give him leverage over European partners. He crawled up the arse of Xi, of Putin, of Trump, of Bolsonaro. There's this moment which is kind of forgotten, but was very funny, where he went to the Council of Turkic Language Nations.
Yes.
The Turkic Language Council. He went to the Council of Turkic Nations, and he looked really ridiculous. He went to the Council of Turkic Language Nations, and he gave a speech about how Hungary was part of it, which is hilarious. If you played that speech in like right-wing media circles, they would sort of probably turn their heads around. And it was a Christian nation. Yeah, a Christian nation, part of Turkish heritage. We're part of a big, greater family. Blah, and everyone at that council meeting just turned their heads and looked at him like, "What on earth are you?" Like the dictator of Turkmenistan and the dictator of Azerbaijan and Erdogan. They all just stood there and looked at him as if he was some sort of clown act. I was like, "What are you?"
That's actually hilarious.
Yeah, because they all saw for his bullshit. They all knew he was here trying to get money and political leverage that he could use at home against Europe.
The funny thing is, it reminds me a bit of Putin, where like, you get the MAGA guys saying like, "Oh, Putin's defending white Christian civilization," blah blah, and then like, you could literally like find like videos of Putin, like in Chechnya, where he's like allowed like Kadyrov to like run his own like Islamist kingdom with Sharia law, and then he's like kissing a gold-plated Quran and like saying like diversity is Russia's strength. It's like, dude, imagine if Keir Starmer was kissing a gold-plated Quran and saying like diversity. Like these people would hate it. So it's just funny.
That is far more amplified with Orban than it is with any of the other. In foreign policy, he's just completely opportunistic. Like his backing of Trump, very open backing of Trump in the last election, is because he hopes Trump will save his ass, because he has no friends left in Europe. Everyone in Europe hates him at this point, and
the
European Union is even openly talking about kicking his country out.
They should actually just cut the subsidies.
I think the threat of kicking him out might be enough to actually drive him out of office, to be honest.
Yeah, there's been huge protests.
So many jobs in Hungary are dependent on the European Union. It's when communism fell apart in Hungary, they did a very rough shock therapy, where within 2 years they basically sold off almost everything that you could sell, all the industries, everything, all the factories. And a huge part of the manufacturing sector was bought up by German companies, and the aerospace sector as well. Like Lufthansa owns the basically almost the entire Hungarian aerospace industry. And if you look at who works what jobs in Hungary, a lot of people work for Bosch, Audi. It's all German companies. They
Yeah.
make car parts and appliance parts, which are then sold all across Europe, I guess. And they are in Hungary in the factories because of the low wages. And if the EU would kick Hungary out, those jobs would all be on the line because you would be outside of the common market.
Maybe they need to actually just put that thread in. Those protests against him recently were pretty amazing.
Yeah, but there have been a lot of protests in Hungary already. I think the thing that,
Yeah,
like,
true.
from what a Hungarian friend of mine told me, and what a lot of Hungarian friends told me, is there was starting to be, like, because he's been here so long, there's already started to be like sort of a grumpiness about his presence in the country. The fact that he's going to have been the continuous Hungarian prime minister for what now, 14 years, and soon he will have been prime minister
Gee.
of Hungary for 18 years. Well, he has been because he was prime minister before that. But it's also his
Yeah.
comments. You might remember that when Orban said that if Russia invaded Hungary, he wouldn't put up resistance to save
Oh,
Hungarian lives, which, yeah,
I
for
have a
you.
question. I have a
B-
question for both of
yeah,
you. Are democracies, liberal democracies, are we losing to authoritarianism?
yeah,
yeah. Right now we are. Right now we are for sure.
yeah. Look what's happening in the United States. That is very disencouraging.
Yeah, they're the biggest democracy in the West, I suppose. So, like, for them to fall borderline into fascism is very very discouraging.
Yeah, it's not looking good. It's not looking good. We are in democratic recession.
But if you look at it, does it mean that liberal democracy is a weak system? Is it something that just
No,
is like
no.
a?
I think we've started to take it for granted. I think we do no longer appreciate what it does for us. I think that a lot of us are depoliticized. Depoliticized in the sense of not that we don't have political opinions, but that we don't take our own institutions and political structures seriously. Like, freedom of speech is an accomplishment of the liberal democratic state, and we just take it for granted. We don't really visualize and think about how there's legal structures, political norms, etc., that keep that thing in place. Lots of things that the liberal state provides, which are really essential to our lives: independent judiciaries, free press, right? The trial by jury, all those things that are so fundamental and essential to us running a good society. We're taking them for granted. We don't associate it with the liberal democratic state anymore. And maybe we should tie it more to these things and say, hey, you only have these things because you live in a liberal democratic state. As soon as you give that up and you live in a Putinist hell shithole, you're not going to have these things anymore.
But how do you see the America shaping up under Trump? Let's assume that he's able to kind of dismantle this system of checks and balances. What's the end game and how will it look? The
I
United
actually don't think he
States.
will. I don't think he can. I think I think at this point it's much more likely that he's going to plunge America into a really deep recession with some of the insane economic stuff he's doing. He just can't really help himself, it seems. And I think if there's then a horrible recession, there's probably a strong likelihood he'll get smashed in the 2018 midterms, and then in that sense, like he's going to be a lame duck president from that point onwards. I'm trying to see the most optimistic thing. The sad thing is that the optimistic case involves still so much pain and hardship for so many people because I think, unfortunately, no matter what happens now, he's probably going to put the country into recession. Like his stupidity with the insane tariff stuff and things like that. The fact that he's willing to trade, $20 trillion economic relationship with a relationship with Europe, which is worth $20 trillion with like Russia. Like, I think, there's, I think he's going to cause a stock market crash, and I think he's going to cause a recession. I'm not sure. What do you think, Kraut?
I'm hoping for that. I hope that,
That's the sad thing, though, to actually have to hope for that because
yeah,
recessions are just such a disaster. Like every time that happens,
but I'm not going to bet on it. I'm not going to bet on it because we now know that we live in a world where pretty much anything is possible. It is
Yeah.
just as possible that his cult following backs him up to the hilt, even as he wrecks the U.S. economy. I wouldn't put it beyond him to actually do a military intervention in Canada at this point.
That's honestly, I
Yeah.
think that can't be discounted. It's a crazy thing. The actual question would become whether the US military would actually follow. And I know constitutionally they have to follow the commander in chief, but would they actually follow?
Or if the American public would be okay with it. And that's a kind of scary thing.
Apparently, the current polling is 58% against his treatment of Canada.
There's nothing that we can do who are not
Yeah,
Americans. There's nothing we
yeah.
can do. And the
We can
scariest
talk
thing
shit
about
about it
this,
here on the
yeah,
podcast.
for now. But the scariest thing is that we just saw the Americans elect Trump, and now we have to hope that the Americans do the right thing, which is not exactly a situation to
Look,
be in.
here's my theory, right? I think people were voting for like lower crime and lower illegal immigration. They weren't voting for war with Canada. And I don't think they were voting for a realignment with Russia and, multipolar world along like Dugin's lines, like I don't think people were voting for that. And so I think Trump's base of like cult followers is about 30% of the American electorate. And I think on top of that base of about 25 to 30%, there's like another 10, 15% of like maybe more normal Republicans. And they just maybe follow along out of, fear and also because they hate the Democrats more than the Republicans. And look, if he does plunge America into a massive recession, would that 15% break? And probably at
I
that
think
point,
some of these people are just really stupid. I'm not going. I'm not. I might sound offensive to some of the American viewers, but some of these people are just that there is this
there is a lot
podcast
of
channel
idiocy.
that does like these I don't know what it's called right now. I don't know the English word when you interview voters and ask them what they think and how they perceive politics. And the the average responses you get from the average Trump voter is just mind-blowingly stupid. Like they literally believe that aid to Ukraine from the US went to paying for transgender surgeries for Ukrainians, and complete whack
It didn't?
nonsense. It didn't,
But
yeah.
there's actually, this is a wild statistic I just saw.
Oh no,
Oh no, we're losing Pekka again.
this is funny.
Pekka, we're losing you, man.
Ah,
No?
yes,
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear.
yes.
No, I can hear. I can hear.
So, liberal democracy is losing to authoritarianism. We're seeing this rise of dictatorships around the world. But do you think that there have been these discussions between China, Russia, and the Trump administration that they've return to this age of spheres of influence, and okay, you can have Greenland and Canada if we can do whatever we want with Europe, and China will be doing whatever they want with
That's
Taiwan
a
and
nightmare.
Australia and so on.
That's the nightmare scenario. 100%. That's the nightmare scenario.
Is it possible?
I think that's what they want, but I don't think it will happen. I think that
That is what Trump wants, I think.
Yeah, I think Putin, Trump, Xi envision a world in which there's great powers, which control basically smaller countries as within their sphere of influence, and these smaller countries would then have to do what the great powers sort of tell them to do. That's what they want, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think what's most likely going to happen is we're going to enter an era of nuclear sovereignty, which would be a first and would be even more dangerous because if Putin pulls off a win out of this war, in particular if Trump concedes to his nuclear blackmail, then the lesson everyone is going to learn out of this war is that the only real sovereignty, the only guarantee for sovereignty that a state can have is nuclear weapons. And
Yeah.
everyone is going to try to get nuclear weapons then. That's
Yeah.
what's going to happen, I think. At least if Putin pulls off a victory, we're going to see nuclear programs come back in South Africa. We're going to see them appear in places like Algeria, Morocco, Saudi Arabia, Argentina, Brazil. That's what I think will happen. Poland will get nuclear weapons. I wouldn't be surprised if the Australians, the South Koreans, the Indonesians, the Japanese, even the Vietnamese, probably the Vietnamese the most because they're very much under threat by the Chinese.
Wow.
So I think we're
Imagine
going
a
to.
world in which
Yeah.
Imagine a world where like dozens of states. I mean, imagine like a world where like 80 states have nuclear weapons. That's actually pretty terrifying.
And dangerous as hell. And that is
Yeah,
more likely, in my opinion, than the spheres of influence world is a world of nuclear sovereignty, which is terrifying. Yeah.
that's the thing. It's the overreach of the dictatorships because can they not see like that is the outcome of their actions? It's crazy. I mean, like, how could Putin not foresee that that's what's going to happen if he's allowed to gobble up all of Ukraine?
Well, a lot of countries every country that enters the nuclear club instantly becomes invested in preventing everyone else from having nuclear weapons, right? So
Mm,
I think that the Russia, the Putins, the Trumps, and so forth, they think they can continue this and that they can continue preventing all the other countries from having nuclear weapons. But I don't think they're going to succeed with that. I do not believe, like, in a nuclear sovereignty world, it would be in all of Europe's interest that Poland get nuclear weapons.
yeah.
Sweden had a secret clandestine nuclear weapons program when it was still a neutral state during the Cold War. They might roll it out again, and there would be no
Wow.
opposition to it. It would
Yeah.
be all of Europe's interest for a country like Sweden or Poland or even Ukraine to have nuclear weapons.
Yeah. Bloody hell.
Do you think Trump will invade Greenland eventually?
I'm not sure. I'm going to wait for the opinions of like a military analyst on this one because they probably they like I read yesterday one of the military OSINT guys who pointed out that it would be a very difficult thing to pull off in the
Oh,
Arctic.
really?
Yeah.
Okay. Why is
I
that?
mean, they've already got bases there.
The logistics of controlling the population. It's a small population, but it's an isolated small population in an Arctic environment, and that is apparently very difficult, logistically speaking. But I don't know.
In Canada?
Right now, the entire world is laughing at him. Canada might be likely. Look at how he talks about Canada. The
Just
open
annex some
contempt.
parts or full scale?
It's difficult to tell with him if he's serious or if he's just being an ass, or if it's both. If he's a serious ass.
I think he's been quite serious. Like, I mean, everybody's laughing at Trump, but he's been serious with everything. Like, he's said what he's going to do, and he's pretty much done that. Except with Russia, he hasn't done anything to Russia for, I don't know. There's no pushback for Putin.
A Canadian-American war would be the single most stupid and pointless war of this that we've seen in ages. What would be the point of that? Who wins anything from that? Would be the end of the Western Alliance completely.
It actually is insane. It literally is a form of insanity. Like 3 years ago, if somebody told you that, you would think they're a mental case. It's like it was so far beyond the realm of like the Overton window, like 6 months ago. It's just insane.
Yeah, it's true. Even 2 months ago, it would have been like, oh, what the fuck? Why is somebody talking about U.S.-Canada war or invasion of? As Joe said, I don't see the point. I mean, even the cooperation between the two countries before Americans got whatever they wanted from Canada and vice versa. It was just a good business deal. So now all that is gone. So is it worth it? It's probably not.
I think if he invaded Canada, I think there would be enough protests in the United States to force him out of office. I don't see a lot of places in the US going along with this, especially in the North and Midwest. A lot of people have good relations with Canadians on the state level. So,
But what about like a smaller scale annexation operation, like what Russia does, liberating the real Americans living in Canada?
in what part of Canada would you get the real? Would you
Great
Saskatchewan?
Lakes?
That's the Toronto area. That's the heartland of Canada. That's the most Canadians that can Canadian live in.
Okay, yeah, I
in
was
that
just recently in
region.
Canada. I have to say my geography of Canada is
Maybe
lacking.
Alberta, which is sort of like the outer
Here's the
fringe
thing,
area.
right? Here's the thing, right? Like part of the problem with these insane things that Trump does and that MAGA does is they force you to discuss these things as a serious possibility. And then I'm sure people would clip this up and be like, oh, look at Pekka, Kraut, Drew, these hysterical maniacs. They're talking about Trump invading Canada. They'll all laugh about it. But like, as Pekka said, everything Trump talks about, he ends up doing. And like, it's part of like this, like, long-term. It's like part of this like MAGA playbook where like they'll deliberately say something insane, and then if anybody responds to it, they'll go, "Oh, you're insane for treating this seriously. Take Trump seriously, not literally." But then it ends up that you have to take him literally anyway.
I don't think there's a point in talking to MAGA people, to be honest with you,
Yeah, of course.
because they do this thing constantly. They say, "Oh, this is silly,"
Yeah,
and then as soon as it becomes serious, they praise it. Like they're just drones at this point. They just do as they're commanded.
I was going to say like that's the Russia playbook because do you remember? I still remember in the lead up to the invasion, every single one of these like talking heads would go out and mock everybody who said there was going to be an invasion. And then the second that Russia actually invaded, then they were all like full blown. No one self reflected. No one said, "Oh, I was wrong." They all just started supporting it straight away.
Yeah, suddenly Ukraine was full of Nazis and bioweapons labs and whatever.
And then prior to that, you were insane for even saying it was going to be an invasion. And
The
then
really infuriating part was when they were like, "Oh, the invasion is not going to happen. The invasion is not going to happen." And then the moment the invasion happens, it's, "Oh yeah, the invasion is okay. It's okay."
Yeah, exactly. And that, see, MAGA would be like that about Canada. It's like the exact same.
They already
playbook.
are. I mean, they are already like that with Greenland. If you go to social media, if you go to Twitter, they are all saying it's like it's okay. This is actually fine. So it's already happening.
U.S. senators are posting that it's okay.
Yeah.
Praising the idea. People with real authority in the state. Besides, well, Trump is real authority. That was a nonsense thing for me to say. Sorry.
But here's another thing, like as well, like even just their strategy for doing these things is insane, though. Because imagine if instead of coming out, imagine if instead in another world where they were much more competent and much more intelligent, instead of immediately coming out with all this belligerence and aggression and threatening Denmark and stuff, imagine they just said, "Oh, we'll pay Denmark and we'll give every citizen in Greenland like $500,000 American." Like it probably, I mean, at that point, maybe it would have worked, you know. But instead, they have to just beat their chest and they have to be insane about it. I don't understand what it is with these people, but like, it's like everything they do, like it's just calculated only for bellicosity and aggression. It's not even that they want to achieve anything; it's just they want to own the libs.
It's also sort of, as you pointed out earlier, the US already has a base in Greenland. It already has full access to the Arctic through that base.
They get whatever they want. They can probably even get the minerals. It's just like,
oh, that's the thing they can't get actually. The minerals and the oil in Greenland is under that really thick ice belt. You need climate change to happen if you want that.
Yeah, but they're doing that as we speak. So
yeah, they're doing that. That's
coal,
Trump's plan as well.
Bring back coal, the clean coal. So
that's also like coal is at this point unprofitable in the US. Coal mining. So bringing back coal just for the sake of bringing back coal.
Yeah, but it's just kind of works in this isolationist vision that Trump has, that everything has to be done in the States and you have to grow your own avocados and coffee and whatever.
Yeah, Juche. It's Juche, man. It's the Kim Jong Un North Korean Juche model, like literally American Juche.
I have one more question, then maybe we wrap up for the first episode. Is okay, we all know that there are these oligarchs working behind the scenes, Elon Musk, David Sachs, Peter Thiel. How much do you think that the American vision is coming from them? And just as a kind of a, well, about AI, I want to ask, do you think that US might be going towards this kind of AI governed thing, that the whole country, a lot of its decision making, even foreign policy could be decided by AI? Or is it just I don't know, something that it's never going to happen?
I think Elon wants that, but I'm not sure whether AI is even technically capable of that. That's the funny thing. But they certainly hate democracy. Like a lot of these tech guys, they dream about like sort of like insulating elites from the people, cutting away democracy through technology and stuff like that. That's a lot of Peter Thiel's sort of stuff. Like he's like backed a lot of people like over the years, people like Curtis Yarvin, etc., where their entire ideology is like the economic elites should just completely rule without worry for democracy at all. It's like plainly anti-democratic stuff.
Joe?
I think AI is overhyped. I might be wrong about that, but I think it's overhyped. I think a lot of AI, especially the startups, are bubbles. And what
Mm,
annoys me the most about AI is all the scams that are happening on social media. To be honest, that's the most interaction that I have with it. Um, I think that we're going through a sort of post-Soviet politics, post-communist politics. What happened in places like Hungary, the Czech Republic, Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, Ukraine, and Belarus in the 90s is now happening to the
mm,
rest of the Western world. That's what I genuinely believe, because
wow.
a lot of what is happening now in the US is things that also happened in places like Hungary. Um,
So oligarchy or what? Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
the one of the first things that happened when Orban became prime minister in 2010 was the biggest opposition media outlet of Hungary was bought up by an oligarch and then shut down. Um,
So that's gonna happen to CNN and MSNBC.
Something like that, or how gentrification of media. That is something that is
Dude,
in
here's the thing though, like they don't need to buy up CNN and close them down. Like honestly, Elon buying Twitter and potential, and also this recent move by Trump to potentially fully legalize, like fully legalize the Chinese control of TikTok. Um, this stuff is probably more impactful than buying up the main stations and closing them down. You know, like Elon would have had way less influence if he had bought MSNBC and turned it into a right wing media outlet. He's done. I think the social media is actually way more important now.
Yeah, I agree with that actually. Yeah.
mm, I'm not so sure about that. I'm very critical of that to a degree.
But why?
There's this great article by Balint Magyar. He partially, this is again a Hungarian thing. He partially blames social media for why Orban has been in charge so long. So
Mm.
before Orban, during communism, the way that the communists of Hungary specifically stayed in charge was through a system of depoliticization where they allowed consumer goods to come into Hungary from the West
Mm.
and then sort of segmented society into different little segments, right? Sort of
Right.
the comfort of a deeper politicized communal life in a small group was sort of the center of the power base of Hungarian communist power. A small
Yeah.
community of people, like 4, 5, 6 families, had their own little comfortable corner where nobody would disturb them, etc. And Balint Magyar sort of draws parallels to that with social media, where he said, okay, if you look at opposition to Orban in Hungary, especially throughout the 2010s, how did it express itself? Well, it expressed itself through Facebook groups, where a group of
Mm.
people who all agreed got together in this group on Facebook, and then they raged about how much they hated Orban. And they basically sat in this group and agreed with each other and amplified each other about how right they all were, without actually having an impact on the real world. Social media can in many ways be used through that way as a system of as
Yeah,
a
to
means of
depoliticize.
depoliticization. Yeah, exactly. You create these small bubbles of insulated comfort where people just go in to comfort themselves about how right they are about the world without really actually having an impact on the world.
Is that also us? Are we in that bubble right now? The
Yeah,
three of us?
I think we have to be honest
Yeah,
about
fuck
that.
this shit then. I'm out.
No, it depends on how much you're capable of doing things outside of your bubble as well. How much how much you're able to go into the real world with your politics and
Here's a good
inform
question though,
people's
Kraut.
decision making.
Here's a good question. Like, it doesn't. How? Why? Okay, I actually agree with you that like social media can definitely be used for the purposes of depoliticization, and Putin actually used that a bit as well in Russia. Like the sort of simulation of opposition throughout, like the early mid 2010s, before like the full blown terrorist fascism that he's gone into since 2022. But what I was going to say is like it doesn't seem like that is the case though in America. In America, it seems almost like the opposite, where like it seems that social media has actually led to this massive repoliticization of huge sections of the population, and then there's just like massive propaganda online that has radicalized a lot of people into pretty scary camps. So it's interesting. Like, do you think social media can also have the opposite effect, where instead of depoliticization, it can actually like drive up these like these trends of like hyperpolarization,
I mean, it
radicalization?
could be. You could certainly influence you could influence the the shaping of political opinions by people by giving them information, but you could also, the danger that we all run who do social media is that we create these bubbles of comfort. And that's something that we have to be aware of. At least those of us who talk about politics and social media, that we have to
That's a
be
good
aware that
point.
we might be creating bubbles of comfort, as Balint Magyar calls them.
Yeah, and
This,
another thing, yeah,
yeah.
that I kind of fear or like related to the AI is that we don't really know anymore who we are talking when we are on social media. We don't know if it's real people because we've kind of gone past the Turing test, and AI is already so good, even though you are critical of it, that you can create bots that can have endless discussions, arguments, and you don't know who you're talking to anymore. So to me, it feels like
That is a
social
big
media
thing.
for me is just a mean of like a media where I inform what I think, but I'm not going to have the conversation anymore with somebody who I don't know because it could be a bot. It's waste of my time, and I mean it's not waste of the AI bot's time, but I mean it's waste of my time.
That's a easy way around it. That if you're going to talk to someone online, always insist that you do a call with them.
Yeah, but I'm just talking generally about posting on Twitter and somebody
Yeah,
saying
Yeah.
yeah.
that.
Before you get sucked into a debate with someone, find a means to find out if it's a real person.
Yeah, that's
Insist
what
on
I
a
do.
call.
Yeah, and we can invite them here and just have a good discussion. But yeah, let's wrap up here. Final thoughts.
Final thoughts. Look, I think people who have similar like-minded views, we all have to band together right now because it is like genuinely a very scary time period, and it seems like our ideology is really on the back foot. It's very hard because liberalism is an ideology that a lot of like crowd reference this, where like people don't even really realize or understand, you know, the benefits, the gains that they've made through liberalism. You know, just simple things we take for granted, like freedom of speech and things like that. And I think what we need is like people to like a sort of like liberal faction to sort of reawaken in the face of these terrible threats, and sort of like what I guess we are doing. Like people have to become conscious. Like this is actually, you know, what I believe in. This is my culture that I've grown up with. I want to actually defend it. I don't want it to be destroyed. Like I think people need to come to that realization, and I hope that we can, through a very tiny small way, we can try do that with the podcast. I'm very conscious of what Kraut said, that like there's always the risk that you're just talking into the echo chamber, but we've got to try, got to at least try, because the alternative, which is like we all do this sort of like Soviet internal exile thing where like I don't know, like Pekka becomes like a watercolor painter and I become like I don't know like just I don't know, like, you know, there's the risk that we all just like sort of like retreat into like the world of like, you know, like, you know, the hard sciences, or like the pure arts, and if we all retreat from the political world out of like demoralization and fear, then it will only allow things to, it'll only strengthen, like, you know, the Orbans of the world, the Trumps of the world, the Putins of the world. Yeah, that's my sort of signing off thoughts.
Joe.
My final thoughts on this are going. I have no final thoughts.
No final thoughts. Perfect.
I have no final thoughts. I have like a political things on this. We're all just getting started and doing this podcast thing. I don't know how big of an impact we're going to have. Maybe just 50 people watch this and think, whatever, and move on. Maybe more. I don't know. We'll see where it goes.